8% of the population. And of course, some of the officers died there in torture, including another Naval Academy graduate. So it was a show that has never been advertised for probably, reasons of not honking your own horn. But the facts are there, and anytime anybody wants all these statistics, I've got them. I swallowed them for this short talk. But boy, I worked hard on that. And I want to tell you, you should be proud of the leadership of this naval service. And we got 3 of them here with me tonight. And I know each of them intimately, and all for different and special reasons. They were the cream of the crop. Denver Key, Jack Fellows, and Bill Lawrence. That brings up the subject, this death I mentioned, the subject of an action that epitomizes the highest virtue to some and the worst sin to others, the willful giving of one's life for a cause. That is to say, human self-sacrifice. Philosopher Glenn Gray, in his book, The Warriors, Glenn is a philosopher but also lived World War II out on the battlefield, tells us that many humanitarians attack the impulse to self-sacrifice as the very core of moral evil. And some express their abhorrence of Christian saints like Paul and Augustine for their mystical conviction that without sacrifice no purgation from sin is possible. On the other hand, after seeing men throw their lives away in battle when caught up in communal passion and expose themselves recklessly and carelessly to mortal danger, Gray admits that he was cured forever of any easy interpretation of human motivation. Gray, the philosopher, concludes, nothing is clearer than that men can act contrary to the alleged basic instinct of self-preservation and against all motives of self-interest and egoism. Were this not so, the history of our civilization would be completely different from what it has been. And now from a scientist, Edward O. Wilson of Harvard, geneticist, entomologist, ant-man, and founder of a field of study called sociobiology. From his book On Human Nature, Chapter 7, Altruism. Quote, generosity without hope of reciprocation is the rarest and most cherished of human behaviors, subtle and difficult to determine, distributed in a highly selective pattern, says the scientist. That's why I chose the words odd and rare a moment ago to describe the natural disposition to make starkly unselfish choices. Continuing with Wilson, that rarest and most cherished of human behaviors is surrounded by ritual and circumstance and honored by medallions and emotional orations. In modern wars, a large percentage of Congressional Medal of Honors were awarded to men who threw themselves on top of hand grenades to shield comrades, aided the rescue of others from battle sites at the cost of certain death to themselves, or made other extraordinary decisions that led them to the same fatal end. Unquote. I think the above quotations from philosopher Gray and biologist Wilson, both professional scholars who are personal friends of mine, are appropriate background for my final set of heroic examples. And when Sybil and I are known to be about to depart for the annual Congressional Medal of Honor Society get-together, people will say to us things like, I'll bet it's really a thrill to be with leaders like that, or military thinkers like that, or religious patriots like that. Almost any gratuitous bestowal of specific virtues will do. We've heard them all. And many of those complimentary adjectives do apply to many of the members. There are about 200 living. In sociological terms, the society is quite a diverse group. There are a few generals and a few admirals and privates and chief petty officers and men with advanced degrees. Others never finished the 8th grade. Millionaires, postal letter carriers, chaplains, probably bartenders. But all of these men mix on solid common ground, not only on a first-name basis, but as true friends who take care of each other. But to categorize them in what I might call fitness report language gets you off on completely the wrong track. These guys all have one big thing in common, and that is they will not accept the status quo if it does not meet their standards. They all have a short fuse. Guys, we've seen that in action in practical ways. Short fuse, when things as they see them are not tolerable. For an instant, or for an hour, or a month, each of them stood up and turned his world around. It's not right that that ticking hand grenade should kill everybody in this foxhole. It's not right that this company of Marines surrounded on this mountaintop by the Chosin Reservoir should wither and freeze and surrender. We're going to break out of here. It's not right that I should bring harm to my fellow prisoners by letting myself be forced to inform on them. Nobody gets a medal for his words or attitude or consistent high-quality judgment or reliability. It can't be given as an honorary degree after a superb campaign. He gets it for a specific act. And it's not something he can try to get. It all centers on one impulse. No, by God, not me, over my dead body. Now, I'm not drawing pictures of one-dimensional people. Guile, intelligence, cunning, subtlety, wizardry, stealth are often part of what goes into the heroic act, in conjunction with the usual courage, willpower, and commitment. But the important thing is that we're not talking about clever foxes, we're talking about hedgehogs. I'm making the distinction of the ancient Greek, Archilochus, in his poem, where he says, the clever fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. And the one big thing these hedgehogs know is to go for the jugular, laying down your life for your friends if required. Now, this is probably a little odd for me to talk, but by way of professional education, I'll throw in the fact that the phrase above and beyond the call of duty, which must be included in the citation, must be literally true. It's not just that we hear it as we hear it so often in a manner of speaking. Literally, the phrase means that the act for which the medal awarded must be beyond the concept of duty, an act the recipient could not be properly ordered to perform. There are some very prestigious medals for heroic performance of duty out there, but this one is reserved for only for acts a person, often without conscious forethought, finds himself doing outside the law. Often without outside the law, outside the rules of procedure, outside what a decent person would ever feel justified in ordering him to do. There is historical precedent for such criteria, starting with Napoleon's initiation of the highest class of his Legion of Honor in 1802. And it has been the European tradition ever since to have various classes of high awards. The name does, you have to have the class to know exactly how prestigious it is, only the highest being above and beyond. The German Iron Cross and others are examples of this. Only Britain and the United States have a one class above and beyond. All these are 18th century inventions. The Victoria Cross for the Brits, started by the Queen in the Crimean War about 1855, and the Congressional Medal of Honor started by Abraham Lincoln during the Civil War in about 1862. What I might call the post-1802 criterion for military heroism is given further legitimacy by those few modern philosophers who dare to address the subject. The old Spaniard, Ortega y Gasset, has an interesting chapter on heroism in his books, Meditations on Quixote, which he wrote in 1914 while a professor of metaphysics at the University of Madrid. I like this guy. One of the things he says is a genius is a man who invents his own profession. I think that's me, and I like that. In specific terms, he goes even further than my remark about a hero being a person who once stood up and turned his world around. The heroes of Homer, writes Ortega, belong to the same world as his desires. In Don Quixote, we have, on the other hand, a man who wishes to reform reality. Such men aim at altering the course of things. They refuse to repeat the gestures that custom or tradition, even biological instinct, try to force them to make. Ortega's hero is so idealistic that he will not even tolerate reality. I like the thought, as you can tell. Maybe it's because Don Quixote, hero, came out of the mind of the man who had been where I've been, Miguel Cervantes, author of that book, as you know, bestseller only second to the Bible, had been a warrior captured by his enemies, restrained in a 16th century prison not much different from mine. He was there in an Algerian prison for 6 years, tortured, attempted 6 escapes, took 6 months in the hole with cuffs and irons, and was chained in his cell. So that does something for you. As I wind this up, I want to